Hi, this is Bob Lepine from Truth for Life with Alistair Begg. We're heard daily and weekends on Bible School Radio, 91.3 KDKR Decatur, Dallas-Fort Worth, and on 91.3 KYJC Commerce.
Portions of KDKR programming do not necessarily reflect the views of this station, its management, or staff.
Prudent Money with Bob Brooks is sponsored by the Prudent Money Foundation on 91.3.
Well, is the inventory of homes increasing in Texas? Today we're going to take a look. Stay tuned for Prudent Money. Good afternoon, this is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Thank you so much for joining me today. You know I do appreciate it. Well, if you've got a question for me, I've got a couple ways that I can get you an answer. The first one is just go to the website at prudentmoney.com, send a question in, and I'll get it taken care of for you. If it's a little bit more complicated there, a few more moving parts, then we can just go to my calendar, pick a time, and we'll talk over the phone and get you squared away that way. So there's a couple ways to get information. All start at prudentmoney.com. Well, today is Thursday, which is so hard to believe. It's like this week when Tony Joe and I always talk about this on Fridays when he comes into the studio. We talk about how quickly the week just flies by. And it's just so hard to believe it's already Thursday. What I like to do every once in a while on Thursday is a Q&A and talk about questions that I get and give some answers to them. And if you've, once again, if you've got questions, you can send them in at prudentmoney.com and I'll get you taken care of. But the first question has to do with those 0% interest rate cards. What do you have to be careful of when applying for those 0% interest rate cards? My book, Deceptive Money, I write about that credit card companies are not in the business to be your friend. They're not in business to give you a good deal. They're in business to take advantage of the consumer. I totally believe that. Now, don't get me wrong. They play an important part in as far as the economy goes and consumers and providing a way to have the ultimate and immediate gratification, the economic immediate gratification, and buy something today with money you don't have. I get all that. It's just the greed is so unbelievable. So this particular question referred to an ad that says top card for 2024 with insane 0% intro APR. Wipe out interest for 15 months. So when you see that, you're thinking that there's going to be no cost. So it goes like this, 0%, and in fact I had to read this numerous times to make sure that I understood it. 0% intro APR, annual percentage rate, for 15 billing cycles for purchases and any balance transfers made in the first 60 days. After the intro APR offer ends, which I still can't believe they're getting away with doing this, like every other credit card, a 19.24 to 29.24% variable APR on purchases and balance transfers will apply. Here's the kicker that I think people forget to factor into the equation of 0% interest. A fee of 3% for 60 days from account opening, then 4% applies to balance transfers. Said in a little bit more easier way to understand, 3% charged against any balance transfer in the first 60 days. After that, it'll cost you 4%. So it's really misleading marketing to say that it's 0%. Interest is a cost, and fees that you don't normally get, which are balance transfer fees, or they are also a cost. So, if you have, pull over money from, and that's why you would get the card. You would be attracted to the 0% for 15 months. So that's the first problem that I have with it. But beyond that, I think that there's three things to remember. The first, if you're there with an interest rate of below 19%, you're guaranteed that you're going to pay higher rates than you're currently paying. And there are still quite a few credit cards that consumers have had for a very long time that are still in the teens. Believe it or not, we count that a good interest rate, which is truly hard to believe. The fine print on your new credit card may be more consumer abusive than on your current card. It's always a good chance. There's a lot of fine print in there that I like to call consumer abusive. And it may be more abusive than what you currently have. Number three, they can change the details of any of these programs just by deciding to do so. And this is what will be interesting to see what credit card companies do when defaults really start to happen. I was reading an article, I can't remember, it's sitting on my desk. I can't remember what the exact numbers were, but it was something like, it was the top 10 for auto delinquency on the payment past 90 days. And Texas ranked 10th. That really out of the country. That really surprised me. So I think once we start to see delinquencies add up and start accumulating at a faster pace, it'll be interesting to see what credit card companies do in response to that. Do they shut some of these programs down? And they've done it many times in the past, especially during the financial crisis. They closed credit cards with balances on them. They raised interest rates. They lowered credit limits. That's a big one. And for some people, they will hold on to credit cards as kind of a extra emergency card function. So let's say they have a Visa with $20,000 credit limit on it, and some people will hold those just in case they need it. They got an emergency fund, but just in case they need that balance, they can go charge on that card. If you've held a card for a long time, not put a balance on it, you probably want to start using it as a charge card and paying off the balance each month. Because it's not going to cost you anything to do that. And the reason being is that credit card companies, I've already heard instances where they're shutting those credit cards down if they're not being used, which kind of makes sense. So make sure that you do that. That could definitely mess up your strategy. This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Thank you so much for joining me today. You know I do appreciate it. Listen, if you are into podcasts, you like to listen to podcasts, that's your preferred way of consuming content, then just know we've got a podcast. We have one every day. It's the radio show, and we publish that about 10, 15 minutes after the end of the show. You can go listen to it on any podcast platform that's available. We're on all of them. And or you can listen to it at prudentmoney.com. But it makes it easier if you miss a program or you just want to listen to education, not a bunch of propaganda, not a bunch of marketing, not a bunch of annuity marketing, which is all you really hear on Saturdays on AM radio. It's all about getting you up the curve on education, what you need to know. And you can listen to it at your leisure through the podcast. And that we have a lot of people who do that, and we really want to make sure that you are aware of that. That's all at the website, prudentmoney.com. Dear Bob, we are waiting to buy a house. We feel that the housing prices are going to take a hit. What is your assessment? Well, I think we have to take a step back and take a look at the details of what's going on that are influencing the real estate markets. The first, of course, is interest rates. I think it's a mistake to assume that interest rates are going to go back to where they were. And I'm not sure how many people are thinking that, but here's my reasoning for that. Is interest rates went down to 0.5% to 0% back as a response to the financial crisis. That was an emergency move. Stayed that way for years. And then we got a big dose of inflation, and they started raising those, the Federal Reserve Board started raising those interest rates. And I think they're at 5.5%, if I'm correct on that. So it's a very big move. The only reason that interest rates were down at roughly 0% to begin with was because of a financial crisis. So I can't imagine a scenario, unless we run into a depression or something, that interest rates would be back down to 0%. So you got to keep that in mind. So the chances of dropping it, 2.5% to 3%, I think are slim to none. In fact, that's not what we'd want, because that would imply that something bad was happening. So it probably wouldn't be a great environment given that situation. So that's the first thing. More on that on the other side of the break. Hey, this is Bob Brooks. Stick around. I'll be right back. Hello, this is Bob Brooks. Proverbs 22:3 and Proverbs 27:12 are the exact same verse word for word. I call them the stewardship verses of risk. A prudent person foresees danger and takes precautions. The simpleton goes blindly on and suffers the consequences. On the Prudent Money Radio Show, we teach about risk, how to identify it, how to figure it out, and what to do about it. We believe that to be a prudent steward, you have to be a good risk manager. Listen to the Prudent Money Radio Show on Bible School Radio 91.3. Prudent Money, home of the modern-day steward movement.
Dr. Charles Stanley.
Are you willing to ask him to forgive you of your sins based on this simple truth, that Jesus Christ, the sinless Son of God, paid your sin debt in full and now declares you no longer guilty and a child of God based on your relationship to him?
The teaching of Dr. Charles Stanley on In Touch, helping you grow in Christ every day.
In Touch, weekdays at 12:30, here on KDKR.
The Apostle Paul's first letter to the Thessalonians highlights the hallmarks of genuine pastoral care. Find out why a balance between truth and love is essential, why only God's Word transforms lives, and why the love between believers transcends the ordinary. Join us this week on Truth for Life with Alistair Begg.
Weekdays at 5:30 a.m. here on 91.3 KDKR.
Welcome back. This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Thanks so much for joining me today. You know I do appreciate it. We're talking about interest rates in the real estate markets. My point before the break was that there is highly unlikely, unless we have some major financial disaster, that we're going to see 0% interest rates, and we're going to see mortgage rates fall to the levels that they were before interest rates started going up. That was an extreme on the low side. Just like double-digit interest rates were an extreme on the upside during the 70s. If you take all of that and you average it out, the average mortgage rate since 1971 is 7.41%, which is what we're probably about a half or so, 1/4% from that. So what I think will happen is that the range of interest we're in right now, this upper sixes to mid sevens, is where we're going to be, and that's just going to be back to average. And I don't know how the markets will respond to that. But here's the thing that is really interesting. And keep in mind that there's a difference between Texas real estate and Dallas, Texas real estate. Dallas, Texas real estate is a little bit different, a little bit more healthy, more probably of a supply and demand scenario than the rest of the state of Texas. But Redfin, who looks at the monitors and analyzes, real estate, came out with the latest report. Says despite a U.S. housing shortage, Florida and Texas have too much supply. Now, they're not saying Dallas, Texas. They're saying Texas in general. The state's accelerated construction to take advantage of pandemic-era demand is over with. But many are now priced out, while Florida, and I didn't know this, has a rising insurance costs, which are pushing down demand. They're having problems with insurance and causing the cost of insurance to go way up, double in a lot of cases. And not a good situation. People don't want to buy into that scenario, especially with the interest rates being where they are. The Redfin News says the number of homes for sale in Cape Coral, Florida, which is one. In fact, I heard a couple of news stories on this today. Cape Coral, Florida, and Northport, Florida, surged roughly 50% from a year earlier in March, more than anywhere else in the country. And in McAllen, Texas, supply jumped 25%. Housing supply is soaring because both states have been building a lot of homes. Florida and Texas have been building more homes than anywhere else in the country, partly to accommodate the flood of newcomers that showed up during the pandemic home buying boom. But that, of course, boom is over, as we talked about, in part because many people have been priced out. Now homes are sitting on the market and price growth is stagnating. I've described this situation with buyers and sellers as a standoff, where the buyer says, my home is worth this amount. I know it is. It's sold this for over this the last couple of years, so I'm giving you a good deal, even though it is much higher than it was 6 or 7 years ago. The buyer says, that was a seller, the buyer says, I could afford your home when my interest rate was at 3% on my mortgage. Now it's 6 3/4 to 7.25%. Can't afford it. That cost is almost doubled. And at some point, one will give. But I gotta think that we're starting to see the buyer give. Supply of the 10 metro areas that boosted the largest year-over-year increases in supply, 6 are in Florida and 2 are in Texas. Dallas supply was up 20% over the year-over-year increase, I think, from March to March. Price drops of the 10 metro areas where sellers were most likely to cut their list prices, 5 are in Florida and 2 are in Texas. One of those was San Antonio. The other one was Houston. And so there you have it. There's also another interesting scenario that I don't think is mentioned that much. Is that one of the bigger problems, and I don't know the percentages of people that this represents. One of the big issues, though, is the number of people who have mortgages at the once upon a time low interest rate mortgages, and they're paying nothing in interest for their homes. So it's kind of one of those things. Why would I want to sell my home and incur twice the amount of payment and interest versus just keep my home and maybe fix it up, maybe remodel? I think we're going to see a lot more of that when people get the realization that, hey, we may be about to go through a real slump here. But the bottom line is, I think anything is at this point early stages, and many people will say that there is not a bubble in real estate. That is the thing about bubbles; most people never see it coming. It's got, you can call it supply and demand, which is the driver, which is a very valid reason. But at some point that corrects itself, and then you got a problem. And really comes down to interest rates. And will they go down far enough to spark a revival again in real estate? Or will we have this stagnation that turns into a decline? So I think that's the thing that you have to keep your eye on and and watch. So we'll see what happens. Hey, listen, I put together, and this is, we're calling it the Risk Survey 2.0. Changed it to a risk assessment because that's what we're trying to do, is assess risk, your risk when it comes to investments. See, because here's the problem, and this is one of the things that I've learned. In fact, tomorrow, I will have been in the business now for 32 years. Just realized this afternoon. And one of the things that I've grown to learn is that if you don't have a risk strategy, what I mean, when risk really builds like it is today, and you're not prepared for it because you don't know what you're going to do, you don't know what you're going to change, you don't have any idea of how to reduce risk, you're just going to board up the windows and write it out when it starts to become a problem. Not yet, but I think it's coming. The problem is that in the financial services business, most people are focused on the growth strategy and not having a risk strategy. So that's the problem. Got the growth strategy. Everybody's got a growth strategy. What's the risk strategy when it really does count? Because a real risky bear market that lasts for 12 to 24 months can wipe out a lot of progress. So what we put together, and we've refined it and changed it up quite a bit, just a brand new 2.0 is out today. And it's the risk assessment, and it takes you 5 minutes to fill out. We've added a couple questions to fine-tune it a little bit. And I'm going to send you back a personalized write-up, and it's going to tell you what your risk level is. And then it's going to give you instructions on how to manage your 401k and options if you don't feel like doing it yourself. So this risk assessment is packed full of resources and options for you. All you got to do is go to the website, fill it in, submit it, and let the process begin. There's no obligation. There's no cost. It's just another way that Prudent Money is stepping up to help investors understand what they are up against. Because risk is very real, and just writing it out, in my opinion, is not the best strategy for dealing with risk. So that's all at the website, www.prudentmoney.com. And I've had a lot of people taking it as of late, And now that we've got it revised, I think it works so much better, so much easier for you to understand and to take some tips and some information and use it to form your own risk strategy. And most importantly, to offer options if you don't want to be doing this yourself. And most of those options are free, by the way. So that's all at prudentmoney.com. This is Bob Brooks. You got a question for me, please go to the website at prudentmoney.com and send it in, because we are all out of time. Till we do meet again next time, keep the faith and have a great rest of the day.
That's all the time we have for today. Questions or comments for Bob, or to find out more great information like what you've just heard, visit www.prudentmoney.com. Be sure to join Bob Brooks again for the next edition of Prudent Money.
Prudent Money with Bob Brooks is sponsored by the Prudent Money Foundation on 91.3.